Welcome to Republican Roundtable. I'm your host, Max Reimer. We are in a critical election year, 2022, and a lot of different races get the big ticket, big news headlines. But did you know the legislative races typically outperform the top of the ticket because legislative locally matter? Relationships matter. Today in studio, I have two friends of mine who are running for their own local legislative races. Shawn Holster, Sami Cisman, thank you both for joining the Republican Roundtable today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for having me.
Let's talk a little bit about the district, Shawn, that you're running in, your background. Tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and why you're running.
Well, I am running for state senate in Senate District 63, which is roughly 1/3 of South Minneapolis, also known as the 3rd Police Precinct. And it's pretty well known over the course of around the world what has gone on in the 3rd Police Precinct.
Yeah, nothing big has happened.
Nothing at all. And I decided to get into this race once I saw who the DFL was putting up on their side of the ticket. And South Minneapolis deserves a reasonable, rational adult, not a activist agitator with very little life experience. I hate to phrase it that way, but it's true.
Tell us about your life experience, your professional background.
For 30 years, I was a cabinet maker and finish carpenter, and for the last 3 years, I've been working in addiction treatment and case management, et cetera, in various aspects of that field. And the big talk is public safety in South Minneapolis. Rising crime rates, rising homelessness, rising addiction, and that's my field. I've worked very directly on the ground with those individuals who society would say are problem individuals. But when we talk public safety, I see it as a matrix, and it's not just policing, it's not just public safety, it's not just public health. It's a matrix of services that we have, both state and county, and then the nonprofit organizations as well, that we don't need more systems to approach this. We need refinement in the systems that already exist and a better functioning social, not safety net, but apparatus to address these problems of violent crime, property crime, homelessness, addiction. They're not separate issues. They're very much intertwined.
Sami, tell us a little bit about your background, your district, and why you're running.
My name is Sami Cisman. I'm running because my background is public relations. I studied public relations, and I have a degree in also addiction counseling, same as, well, in the field of Shawn Holster. I understand that there's co-occurring disorders that's going on in our state. A lot of Minnesotans are facing a mental health crisis as to why the rising crime is happening. And it goes back to more of addiction because these people can't afford to get their next high, so they're committing these crimes, and it's coming to the suburbs now. I'm running because I'm a girl who was born in Minneapolis to immigrants, and I'm seeing these issues following us to the suburbs. And I want to stop that from following us because there needs to be a system put in place for rising crime, and we need to fight back for a safer community, bring back respectful rhetoric and policies that support law enforcement and victims of crime, and put a stop to the crime wave we have seen take over Edina and Bloomington under the areas of DFL stronghold. Saying please and thank you and putting in hard days of work should not be a partisan issue, but it has become one, and following the rule of law and respecting authority shouldn't be a political issue, but unfortunately it's become one, and that's one of the reasons why I'm running. I want to eliminate politics from the rule of law. In law enforcement, that means if we convict and hold accountable those who are committing the crimes, we would save lives by preventing young people from doing this.
Now, you both represent districts which every Republican consultant, expert, Twitter expert says that Republicans need to start winning again in order to win even statewide, that being the urban core, that being suburban Minnesota. I'm very interested. Do you feel like we're in an environment right now with crime, with some of the other issues we talked about? Shawn, do you think in your area, do you think people's hearts are open to change?
I think they are, and I think that that is due in large part to the radicalization of the DFL. The DFL no longer wants centrists in their party. And moderates and older DFL members, they're frustrated, they're angry. Independents don't have a candidate right now. Libertarians don't have a candidate. It's a hard sell as a Republican in South Minneapolis. At the same time, I think I can be that candidate because, as I like to say, I'm not walking into a vegan restaurant and throwing raw pork chops on the wall. That's it's just not effective. And as a homeowner and a longtime resident, community organizers aren't what's needed because what is being labeled as a community organizer is actually a community agitator. And I don't think there's a stomach for more of that in South Minneapolis any longer. And I think I can be the candidate that gets over that branding issue of being a Republican because it's time. We have to, otherwise we're looking at our city burning again.
Sami, I mean, your district is a little bit different, right? I mean, when we talk about Edina, we're talking about, until very recently, Edina had been a Republican stronghold since the state's inception. Yeah, I'm wondering, you know, is there that appetite for change? Are you seeing that when you talk to constituents, when you're at the doors? Are you seeing a willingness to say, hey, I'm willing to overcome maybe that branding problem because my community is suffering?
Yeah, I'm seeing that. I feel like a lot of my constituents that live in my district are pretty much afraid of how rising crime is affecting the city and how it's taking a strong hold over the city. And it's like, and I'm thinking that 2022 is going to be a good year for Republicans. So I'm assuming that they will be open to change. So
you both talked a lot about crime, and that seems to be the predominant issue. Public safety, what is actually happening in our homes and our neighborhoods and our communities. Sami, are you seeing any other issues kind of bubble to the surface that people are concerned about beyond that issue that you're talking about?
Beyond that issue?
Beyond crime, are you hearing any other kind of issues at the door as you talk to people that people are concerned about?
Education. Some people are afraid of indoctrination, you know, what's happening in the Edina School District. Not only that, high expectations, and the other side wants to reduce the standards and the expectation of results. And why would we want to break what's working in Edina? I'm against that, and if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Edina's education is the top in the country. Why would we reduce our standards of education?
Well, and we absolutely need school choice.
School choice.
I look at the competency rates in math, English, everything else. Roosevelt High School is right down the street from me. They have 30%, anywhere between 30 and 40% competencies in any subject. That is below F. It's abysmal. And how do you even look at graduation rates? You know, and how do you even look at graduation rates when the competency is at 30, 40%? What good is a graduation at that level of competence?
If we're graduating everybody, you know. You were saying something about the achievement gap. Is that something that you're noticing in your neck of the woods?
Actually, Minnesota top is at 83% for the achievement gap currently. And I feel like as a person who's running for office, I want to close that achievement gap. Not only that, raise our standards and make sure it's something that a lot of people are upheld to.
We've talked a little bit about, in both of your districts, right, the issue of the brand, if you will, the issue of being able to overcome that, you know, that perception and have somebody pull the lever for maybe a party that they've never pulled the lever for before. Shawn, how are you kind of differentiating yourself from, say, the platform or, you know, the issues, more of the red meat stuff? I'm wondering how you're kind of planning on differentiating yourself.
I'm not a red meat kind of guy. That I don't see the point in that. I think there is more commonality between your average middle class, urban/suburban voter. I mean, we care about our tax rates. The property taxes in Minneapolis are raising exponentially again. What about housing? You know, there is the 2040 plan, right? And don't bulldoze our neighborhoods. Well, that's happening. You know, blocks of homes are being bulldozed, and you have these 4- and 6-story tin-clad apartment buildings being put up. Whatever happened to the idea of starter homes? Those starter homes are getting wiped out. And I hear affordable housing, I hear warehousing of humans, because there's no property ownership. It is creating a permanent renter subservient class. And it feels awful in my soul to be watching this happen to South Minneapolis. And this cannot be approached on a city level. It has to be approached on a legislative level, on the state level, because there is no other way to touch this. And the idea of rent control, that's just going to jack up rents.
And it actually limits the people from reaching their full potential, because you have to meet a certain income threshold. So it actually doesn't really help people. It actually brings people down.
Right, and I think to your point, it does. You know, when we discourage ownership of things, you know, I really think that robs us of our human spirit to excel, to want to have dominion over the things that we actually have worked for. I think that's very important. Sami, I'm wondering, in your district, how are you kind of overcoming the stereotypes or the preconceived notions about what a Republican is and what a Republican believes? Because you're going to have to win a bunch of independents and some Democrats in order to win your district.
True. First, I've been hearing stories, they're just, people in my district are like, oh, she's from Somalia, but no, I was born here, to immigrants. And they're all wondering, how the hell is she going to tell us what's wrong with our country? But there's a lot wrong that we need to fix. And that's just the reality. The reality is that we need to get America back on track. We need to work together in order to win 2022. I want to reach out to independent voters. I want to get their votes. But the question is, how will I get their votes? Most of the independent voters are business owners in Edina. I want to improve business climate. Business climate in Edina, people are moving their businesses out of Edina right now. So those are one of the jobs in the economy. The economy is one of the reasons one of the main focuses I want to focus on. So.
We talk a lot about contrast on this show. You know, it's important, obviously, that you're both running, you know, positive campaigns that are focused on the issues. But, you know, part of your job is to contrast yourself with your opponent. And you can tie your opponent to national figures or Tim Walz or what have you. But, Shawn, you made mention that you have a pretty radical opponent. I'm wondering, you know, how what you're doing right now to contrast yourself from your opponent.
3 things: honesty, humility, and humor. I am not a trained activist. I am not fresh out of college working within these activist organizations like my opponent. And I'm glad this kind of dovetails into, one of the things I push hard is the power of personal agency. That these systems that are being created, these cycles of dependency, rob people of their personal agency, a sense of self, a sense of purpose, a sense of connection. And that is where I want to come in, and especially working in the field that I have, is that's the only thing that breaks people out of the cycle of dependence, is when you start having a sense of ownership of self first, and getting these systems out of the way, or knocking down some of these systems, because those can only do so much. It takes that personal engagement. It takes individuals coming together, not through some nameless, faceless organization or program or whatever else. We start not making these agencies and programs more efficient. That's going to bring our tax dollars down and down and down. That puts more money in people's pockets to actually address the issues that are facing them directly, instead of worrying about chipping in to solve all society's problems all together, all at once, because that doesn't work. It just doesn't.
So, Sami, when you have people who say, you know, the current representative, why do you think you would do a better job than her, or why do you think you'd be different than her in office? What do you tell people?
Because I tell people that I'm an optimistic leader. I want to listen to everyone from both sides and not just vote on one political party. I want to be able to listen to to all my constituents and have an actual better introducing bill record than what my current representative has. So that's what I tell people.
What do you see kind of, how are you going to be different? So there's been a few election cycles where in Edina, I think it's what, 2 election cycles since Dario Anselmo was roughly in the district. How are you going to campaign, and what is kind of your path to victory?
Different by prioritizing public safety and law enforcement. That's number one. Education and jobs in the economy, because I believe that we need to be fiscally responsible. My top priorities as a representative for Edina and Bloomington will be to lower the barriers for businesses to succeed in our state, and to seek to lower taxes for our struggling seniors, working families, and small businesses, and reduce the burdensome regulations which right now stifle competition, job opportunities, and economic mobility. I plan on putting my business background to work, focusing on protecting taxpayers and improving Minnesota's business climate so we can attract new businesses and high-quality careers and not jobs.
Shawn, you know, you're in a district that hasn't been in Republican hands, very different than Sami's district. It hasn't been in Republican hands in a long, long time, I'm sure.
About half a century.
Yeah. So we talked about the environment being a little bit different, but I'm just wondering, you know, obviously your wife Diane ran for the seat last cycle. And what might be different this time around about Shawn Holster's campaign that could give some of our viewers encouragement about this district and Minneapolis maybe in general?
First-hand experience with the issues of what we're facing, and being able to pragmatically look at, okay, I don't want people shot by the police. You are not going to solve any sort of police-related issue by defunding the police. No, if you defund the police, how are you going to train them more adequately to deal with mental health crises and other points of entry that these individuals are entering the criminal justice system, the behavioral health system, everything else? We not only need to fund our police, staff our police, train our police.
Retain and hire high-quality law enforcement is what I believe.
Exactly. And to provide that training of crisis mitigation and that point of interaction, that, yeah, how do you achieve that with a defund or abolish the police movement? Because you're not going to find social workers to replace the police.
And social workers, in all reality, they can't de-escalate certain situations, like someone getting robbed or carjacked in Edina. Like, that's not something our social work can de-escalate, I believe. So we need to retain and hire high-quality law enforcement. So.
And speaking about that pragmatically, right? I gotta imagine it's somewhat hard to not be blood red and to not be kind of you rah conservative, even though we talked about building an independent brand. Sami, I'm wondering, with your background, with your experience in PR and navigating kind of hard situations, you know, how are you able to kind of navigate this water between maybe some of our Republican activists and the general public in Edina? How are you able to talk to real people?
By going out, engaging in the community, attending events and stuff, and just being me. That's how I feel like I can.
And it's resonating? You feel like people are really jumping on board right now?
Yeah, a lot of people, most people are, but I'm still working the process, so I still have a lot of door knocking to do and attend more events and stuff, so.
Well, and for both of us, I think we can bring the difference between practical experience and how it's not just theory. You know, we've worked in these environments. I've performed first aid. I've brought people back from the brink of death.
We dealt with manipulators, liars, like anything you can even book. We dealt with it in our field. So I feel like we can help them in a way where there can actually be a way for real rehabilitation.
Right, and there has to be a focus on taking the systems that we have in place and moving back towards a sense of personal responsibility, instilling that sense of personal responsibility instead of just blaming cops and instead of blaming society. What I see on the radical left is a culture of blame and resentment.
A political game.
And manipulation. We talk about being familiar with liars and manipulators, and that's all I see out of the radical left.
Yeah.
Sure.
A neo-tribalisation, if you will.
Well, I do want to park it there, because when we talk about mental health, and I think it's actually an under-talked about issue at the state level. I mean, what kind of levers can we pull to address, you know, our mental health crisis, which is as prominent in Minnesota, I think, as it is anywhere else? What power would you as a state senator, you as a state house member, what power do you have to make a change?
May I? What we have in the state of Minnesota is you have quality of care and you have levels of care. There are 5 different levels of care in behavioral health and addiction, right? And I'm all too familiar with the personalities that have gone through treatment 10 times, 15 times, 25 times. That is one level of care. Like, say you go to M Health Fairview, their recovery program. It needs to be addressed that, okay, you've gone through that program 5 times, that level of care. There needs to be a mechanism on the state level, legislatively, to say that, okay, you've crossed that threshold, you are now mandated to go to the next highest level of care. That there needs to be a conversation had, because where a lot of this comes from is called the Olmstead Act, which it was a Supreme Court decision, not an act per se. We need to look at how we are housing or institutionalizing these people. Again, Olmstead is what started the idea that mental health and sometimes criminal personalities belong in the community as opposed to an institutional environment. And what we are seeing is, okay, that only goes so far. That yes, indeed, there are some that need to be in that institutional environment. I don't think it needs to be jail, but we're also, if we're taking a long, hard look at it, it's a civil rights issue. You know, because you can't hold somebody against their will on a mental health hold or a chemical dependency hold, a co-occurring disorder. You cannot physically restrain them, period. You cannot hold them against their will. We're actually talking about what level of civil rights do you lose once you require a certain level of incarceration or treatment. And that's a very difficult thing to look at, and it's a discussion that needs to be had on a state level.
Sammy, anything to add to that? I mean, as a representative, what do you think? You know, what do you
As
think
a
you have to
representative,
do?
I can talk about because I was a treatment coordinator, I can talk about how counselors are actually fed up and burned out with dealing with people who are just going in and out the system, and you see the same faces most of the time. It takes 25 treatments to get it right. And counselors and people who are in this field are burned out, and they deserve a high raise. And I feel like when I get to the House, I can actually advocate for that. Not only that, to make mental health and substance abuse, since it's co-occurring, more treatment friendly. It's not treatment friendly right now. So I feel like if it's more treatment friendly, we can have a real rehabilitation for these people. But these people, they need to look for their next high. They're going to continue to commit these crimes. They will not only be in the city, they will be coming to a suburb near you, and there is nothing you can do about it unless judges hold these people accountable.
Well, and it's also an interagency communications issue,
Yes.
where there is prohibited communication between institutions without specific releases of information, ROIs. You know, I don't know if this character has been through 15 different treatments at 15 different facilities unless there's a specific ROI.
ROI.
And his neurology is so fried he doesn't remember where he's been.
Yes.
I've had instances where if I didn't have previous experience with an individual in another organization, now I'm doing case management with a nonprofit organization to recognize a name going, oh no, this file is completely wrong.
Classic government.
Yeah, and
Hey,
not only that, parents of these children are actually tired of what they are doing. There's too much catch and release going on. The parents are fed up. They want a system that will work and hold their kids accountable. Because a child or a teenager is just going to say, oh, I'm going to go carjack in Edina, or I'm going to go carjack in Bloomington. But guess what? I'm going to come out and probably like 2 days or 3 days, I'll be back out on the streets to recommit the same crime again, because they're not held accountable. And it's just a reoccurring event. So it's like we need to make sure there is a system put in place for these kids to obey.
and some accountability.
And accountability to take place.
So for the last kind of 30 seconds, I could talk to you both all day. You know, we need to know how people can get involved with your campaign, where they can go to learn a little bit more about you. Sammy, if you could, just let us know how to get involved and what to look for.
You can follow me on Facebook, Snapchat, oh, not Snapchat, sorry, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Sami Cisman MN. My website is samicismanmn.com.
Very good. And Shawn, for you, how can we get to know you a little bit better?
ShawnHolster.com. Shawn, ShawnHolster, yes, as in holster your weapon, .com. And then I'm on Facebook, I'm on Twitter, I've started a YouTube channel, Substack as well. My Substack concentrates more on the behavioral health issues, and that's called Every Day is Day Zero. And yeah, and go to my website, that's my phone number. There's no staffer answering the phone.
Well, that's good.
It's me, myself, and I.
That's good. Well, thank you both so much for joining the Republican Roundtable today. Good luck in your races, and thanks for joining the arena and running for office.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
This has been the Republican Roundtable. I'm your host, Max Reimer. Until next time.